Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast with your host, Curt Hilton. Listen in on interviews with voiceovers, filmmakers, producers, animators, and much more. Curt, a voice actor himself, will give insider tips to the business, talk with guests about how they got into the business, and be sure to stay tuned to the end of the podcast when he challenges his guests with a pop-up audition. Now it's time for Behind the Audition podcast. Here's Curt Hilton.
Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. On this episode, I spoke to the amazing actor Teneisha Collins. We talked about how she started as an actor, always training as an actor to keep her skills fresh, working with Kevin Hart on the #1 Netflix hit movie Fatherhood, and we talked about so much more. I do have to apologize for this week's episode. My microphone did clip off right before Teneisha and I did start, but it did sound okay in the end, and hers sounded perfect. So sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Audition podcast.
All right, coming to the show, you have seen her in Boost. You have seen her in Future Man, and now you've seen her in the #1, that's right, #1 movie on Netflix, Fatherhood. Welcome to the show, Teneisha Collins. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here today, Curt.
Absolutely. I know we were talking before the show, and we'll talk about Fatherhood in a second, but that movie, I didn't think a Kevin Hart movie would choke me up like it did, and it was fantastic. I hope he gets many awards for that. But you sold it yourself on that, and you did a fantastic job on that movie.
Thank you. It was so much fun to work, and it was easy just because the material, it's a real story. The material was there, and I played opposite Kevin Hart and Melody Hurd the entire time. So I had so much to go off of, and our director was just amazing. He let us just kind of go organically based on what we felt versus what he had in mind. And then he's like, I'll adjust if necessary, but he never really did because it was just magic the whole time. As cheesy as it sounds, it was pure magic in the most beautiful way possible.
That is awesome. And so before we get to that movie, I want to talk about how it all began. The podcast is, the auditioning process and, actors, how they prepare for their roles. And so when did you know you wanted to be an actor? When did it all begin?
I think I was born a performer. I probably performed out of the womb. But when I was 8 years old, I had a teacher who used to be an actor. And what she did is she decided she was going to make a program to not just have us perform in theater, but have us create. So we take our favorite stories and we would, as 8 to 12-year-olds, totally rewrite them completely to perform them. So at 8, I made my stage debut in a gender-bending role as Santa Claus, which was fun and chaotic. And that was the moment that I got hooked. And I think before that I was already doing, skits to my parents and one-woman shows, and every now and then enlisting my sister as the hostage to be my co-star. And I probably heard it, I swear on Entertainment Tonight or something, that you needed an agent, because I don't know where else I would have heard it. But at 10 years old, I literally went up to my parents with the yellow pages. That's how old I am, the yellow pages, and was like, find me an agent. And they were just like, okay, let's do this. And I got an agent at 10. And, my younger sister, at the time I only had one, now I have several siblings. She was adorable, very shy, and she hated this industry. And I think it's really hard to be the parent of a child actor with other children who aren't at all involved, who don't want to be in it. And it was really it was torture for her. I could see she hated it. She's not as outgoing as I am. So it was more, I'd say, of a hobby, little side thing. I wasn't like, those child actors that you see today. It was really just for fun, but it was always in my heart. So I was always doing plays. I was doing little things here or there. I did a lot of, acting in music videos as a child. I think right after that play, I did my first music video at 8. And I took a little break in my late teens. But when I say a break, just means that I just let it go, but I was still doing stuff. I was still acting. I was still doing small shows here or there. And at about 20, I'd say I jumped back into it because it never left me. And even as I did other things, other careers and I call them other lives, I always came back to acting. So at 20, I jumped in and through, this beautiful synchronicity, I ended up always aligning with the right people to kind of point me in the right path on that yellow brick road, pointing me to my perfect coach who was able to bring out the best in me, pointing me to like my second agent, which was not a starter agent. And that was just this domino effect. And it's been this really wild crescendo every year where it's this like hyperbolic climb in terms of the work that I'm doing, but not just the amount, but the quality, and diversifying within different parts within our industry. Every year it's something new that I'm uncovering. So it's been a long process, but it feels forever, and it feels like not a lot of time because I'm always discovering new things at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. As a voice actor, we can act and close our eyes and do a character, or do something where we don't have to look into a camera. And I'm always curious, how do you prepare to look into a camera or look on a set with a bunch of people and just remember those lines? What do you do to prepare for that? Because I'm just so curious, because if I see a camera on me, I'll be honest, I'm like, you know what I mean? What do you do to prepare yourself?
I think, when they say dance like nobody's watching, that's what it is. And as much as, we might get nervous during an audition or something, as soon as I cross that a certain threshold, it just all falls off of me and I forget what's around me. And the fact is that when you're on a set, even if it's a small commercial set, there's so much business happening around you
Mm-hmm.
that you don't have time to think about, oh, that camera's on me. It's
Right.
more just, there are 100 people around me all doing all these different jobs and they're frantic. Let me just be focused and do what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a very, very good memory, like crazy good memory.
That's awesome.
So I'm very fortunate. I don't need to focus too much on the memorizing because I'll read something a few times and know exactly where it is on the page. Like I still remember, I can pull up a script and know which page to flip to.
Wow.
From like 10 years ago to find certain parts of the script, which is really cool. So I don't really worry about the memorizing. I think, and this, and as silly as it sounds, I think before any new project, whether it's a voice gig, whether it's even a commercial or the first day on a new project, the night before, I always have this totally unwarranted fear that I'm going to get to set or to studio and they're going to be like, oh, why are you here? We didn't want you, So I feel like a lot of my prep, besides, prepping for the actual role and getting into the mindset, is also just being like, don't do that to yourself, like cutting that voice off, because we always hear horror stories of somebody getting on set and being fired the same day. And so it's always like, well, what if I get there and they're like, no, we meant the other one or somebody else, So,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny. Remember MTV VJs? Remember them? How they were like, so
I
like,
one of those so badly.
Yes. So back when I lived in St. Louis, I had a friend who owned a nightclub out there, and he's like, hey, we're having VJ auditions. And I'm like, I was a DJ in the area. I'm like, I can do this. I'm going to get up there. I'm going to tear it up. And I got up front and they had the cue cards and they had the camera. And I was like, and I didn't say one word. And I always want to ask somebody, how do you guys do it?
But you know what? I have to say that it's hard. I find it harder to look into the camera than it is to look away, because you have the practice, especially if you're supposed to be training. So you're training, you practice, that I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking off camera. But let's say whether it's a film or a TV project where you're actually speaking to the audience, or a commercial, that is the most awkward thing to me, because I'm just staring at like the end of the barrel and I'm like, holy crap, like I need to be there. And all of a sudden, all of a sudden your eyes start twitching. Your eye never twitches before, but all of a sudden your face is like being more to that, to me, is harder. But also the pressure of like, cue cards in front of you.
Absolutely.
That to me is, you're completely on the spot.
Wow.
It's like, even for a voice gig, a lot of times you get the script when you're in studio, but you have time to read it over, maybe once or twice before, at least try it a couple of times. But when you're live and you just have cue cards, I can understand why you'd crap your pants in that moment.
It's so crazy. And I will have to say that, for you actors to, remember your lines like you have to, we can read a script, as for starting out, did you get a coach, or did you get like an agent to work with, to practice your acting skills? Who did you hire first?
First of all, I think a lot of people have the misconception that once you start working, you stop training. And it's a continuously improving process. The top athletes are constantly training. They're working with new coaches. They're learning new skills and they're practicing all the time. Musicians do the same thing. Actors should do the same thing, whether it's voice or on camera or whatever. So I am constantly training. As a child, I'd say a lot of what I learned was in school and through the productions and through the direction that I was getting. As a very young adult, I got in Canada, Canadians would know her, Jacqueline McClintock, who was the top coach in the Meisner technique. And I'm a student of Meisner. It's kind of how I feel it's how I can deepen my performances so much. So Meisner was something that really spoke to me. And I trained in it for a decade. And it's something that I keep referring back to.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely to me, that was something Meisner, I did on camera classes to help me first, as I was beginning on camera, doing the transition from stage to camera, it was helping me feel grounded and learn different techniques because there are so many techniques that you have to learn and acquire. And then as I started working more, it's a gym. It's like doing, reps on the gym. So even now, like I'm in between shoots, I'm in an on-camera class to be able and doing challenging scenes to go to my gym. So it's a constant process for me. I as a child, I'm in Montreal, so it's different. It's French, right?
Yeah.
I was learning different French accents.
Oh, that's cool. Do you have a really cool one you could use?
Bien sûr, on peut parler un peu à l'international. We can speak plutôt québécois, which is a little bit like in Quebec, it's kind of like US versus UK English.
That's awesome.
Quebec versus France English. French, not English. So one feels more refined, but there's different levels to it, right? So being able to distinguish between that made a huge difference for me. And now, right now I'm working on a New Orleans accent, which don't ask me to do it. It's terrible right now. But I'm playing a character who's from New Orleans, so I got to work on that. And I do believe, and it's something that I feel not only keeps me feeling productive in downtime, but also keeps me on the process of continuously improving is training. Right. And to me, if I'm not evolving, I'm dying. If you're just standing still, not growing, then you're just going to be known for. That's why there's actors who are always known for the same thing. And then they, you imagine like you finally get this amazing opportunity in whatever sector of this industry you're in, and you haven't actually expanded your skills. So when you get this opportunity, you completely bomb.
Right.
And I think Will Smith always said that you need to be ready so you don't have to get ready.
Oh, I like that. That's
something that I remember all the time. So it's like, if like the New Orleans accent is foreign to me, but everything else about that, I'm already ready to do. I don't have to worry about everything else. I know that if I book an animated project, I've done the training, I've done the work, I have the experience, that I'm ready for that new chapter. So whatever that means for you is just being ready. And that's part of it, is continuously training and being like, hey, I suck at this. Let me see if I can get at least like to a functional level so that if I get that opportunity, I don't bomb, and that can open new doors for me,
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're in Canada, and so I guess there's another misconception. You have to live in LA to be in the movies. And so you live in Canada. How do you keep in the game living in Canada?
Well, I think the benefit of living in Canada is that Canada, like first of all, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, they're 3 of the top 10 film markets in North America.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
The top 7, right? And at one point in the early 2000s, Montreal was actually number 1. We had more productions than LA and New York combined.
Wow.
So Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver are locations that a lot of American productions will come to shoot here. Because it's so easy. Montreal can look like Europe. It can look like New York, Toronto as well. Riverdale's shot in Vancouver. A lot of CW shows are shot there. It's like smoke and mirrors. You never know where things are filmed. So being in a huge entertainment hub, to me, that's very, very easy. I have a very, very solid team who's amazing and really keeps me up to date and pitches me for some amazing roles. But it's also, being in Canada, unless you're going to the States, which is totally possible, you can go through an O1 visa, you can still make a career. And I've made I built my career of mostly major network American projects in Canada without an American rep, because they can't pitch me in the States, right? So, there's no black or white answer to how you can break into the American industry in Canada. But I think that a lot of people think they have to leave. And the people that I know, the actors that I know, whether they're American or Canadian who are in LA, unless you're at a certain level,
Mhm.
the climb is a lot harder to make and will take a lot more time. Montreal is a big city, but a small world. And even in Canada, our entertainment industry, we have a big network of actors and creators, but we all kind of know of each other. So work leads to work leads to work. Whereas in LA, you can book a huge role on a show and then get forgotten until a few years later. Here,
Wow.
it's easier to kind of build that momentum. And
Mhm.
I'm experiencing that now, whereas at one point, I was only being seen in my city. Now, then it expanded to Toronto, and now it's expanding across the country. And then American productions that are planning to shoot in Canada are then reaching out as well, right? But that was a process, and that was a journey to get to.
Wow, that's interesting. And so let's talk about the number one movie that you're in right now, Fatherhood. I mean, that, like, I just watched it the other day. It came out, and I was by myself, and I was telling you, I was like, okay, so I saw the previews, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be one of those movies where it's gonna catch me off guard. I might be, get tear jerking stuff, make sure nobody's in the room with me here. And it totally caught me off guard. It was everything that I expected, but more and better. And congratulations to you, Miss Burns, on one of the coolest movies I've seen all year. How did that role happen?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, okay, first of all, for me, it's a fun story. I'm very much about mindset and, obviously, like, it's a little bit juju and I'm not fully into that, but I do also believe that what you put out is what you receive, because you just notice it more, right? The more you put out positivity, the more you notice it, not that you're going to get more of it. Anyways, at the beginning of that year, I had decided to make a list of everybody I wanted to work with. I don't even know where it came from. I was just, let me just do a data dump, but I made a whole list. And the majority of them were actors that I personally already knew. Friends of mine who I think are the most talented people ever. But on that list was Kevin Hart, was Alfred Woodard. And 6 months later, I'm on set working with them.
Wow.
And to me, I was like, holy effing, like, holy crap, like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I have to say, the casting process to me wasn't much different than any other casting process. My agent contacted me about an audition. I knew that the project was coming already, just because I'm a nerd in that sense. I need to know everything that's happening, so I keep my ear to the ground. I knew it was coming, and I saw the breakdown of the character, which is basically the character description. And I was like, okay, this is a really interesting character. I really like her. But then I heard of another role in the movie that I really liked, which was the character of Liz Loebland, his wife who passes away. And she spoke to me. So I contacted my reps and I was like, hey, I want to go in for this role as well. So I actually auditioned for both parts, which was a really amazing experience because they're so different. And my first audition was just with the local casting agents here, who are incredible. And we played with the character a bunch, very different than what I had imagined her to be. And I got great feedback, which you don't often get in an audition. Usually it's just like, thank you, see you next time. And maybe you see them again about the role. Maybe you never hear about the role again. But I got great feedback in the room, great feedback afterwards, got a call back. I didn't know that the director was Paul Weitz. I love Paul Weitz. He co-wrote and directed About a Boy, which is one of my favorite movies, Mozart in the Jungle, American Pie. He's really well known. So at the callback, working with Paul was really amazing because you get direction in a callback and you have an idea of what the casting director envisions the character to be. So I prepared what I had in mind and then what she had in mind. And then you go into the room and you throw all that out the window. And I swear we tried this character. Miss Burns had seven completely different personalities. She was extra caring. She was like cuckoo. She was super strict. And it was just so fun because we actually played with this character for a big chunk of time. And I felt really great about it. I thought that I booked the room. Whether you book the role, that's a different story. But I knew that I had, the casting director's buy-in and I had the director. He loved me. But whether the studio, whether I fit, that's a whole different story. And then it's the waiting game. You wait and you wait and you wait. And literally I waited a month. And in between, I was still auditioning for other things. So that casting director, every time I saw her, she'd be like, just so you know, you're number one. You're still in consideration. I kind of cheated. I have a friend who works in the production office, and he was very kind. I'm not going to reveal his name, but like, he was very kind. He sent me a picture of like their shortlist wall. And they had all the headshots of all the actors for every role that they were like their number one choices.
Yeah.
So like once a week, you'd be like, you're still on that wall. You're still on that wall. You're still the number one choice, but you never really know how it's going to happen. And it was about a month after my last audition, so like 8 weeks or 7 or 8 weeks after after the process started, that I finally found out that I booked it. And it was such an incredible moment because it was like the day before I was about to fly to Miami, but that night I was seeing Oprah live, and my mom and I had splurged for these like fourth row seats on the floor. So there were moments where she's actually speaking directly to you, looking in your eyes. And there were some very profound moments. So it was just like this magical day to like, you know, basically meet Oprah and then book this role and then come back from your trip and immediately you go for a fitting and you start in production for this project. It all just, you know, they always say everything happens in the right time.
Yeah.
And I always say you need to be patient. Patience is not my virtue. So I'm not a patient person,
Yeah.
but everything about that, the timing was just really perfect.
Yeah, you did a great job, and you know, as a parent, and when I'm not going to give it what happens, but when he drops his daughter off to you, you had that stoic face of one of the teachers that you see at school, and you sold it like, you know, when a parent sometimes will let somebody have it or like don't want to talk to somebody. Your facial expression sold it, so that was great because it was a believable role that you did. You know what I mean? Sometimes, you know, and then you could tell the chemistry you guys had on set was amazing. You know, I listen to Kevin's podcast every week. I love, you know, his comedy is amazing. And I heard on his podcast that he actually memorizes his lines as well, and he's a perfectionist. How was that working with Kevin Hart? That had to be amazing.
You know what? It was incredible. So I have to say that going into this, I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't seen The Upside yet, which is another great film of his, and it's dramatic comedy. I hadn't seen it yet. I watched it while we were filming. So I didn't really know what he could bring in the dramatic sphere. So I expected him to do as well as any stand-up comedian would do, you know, which is just like an okay job. I thought it was just like kind of going to be something very shticky, you know, like he'd do okay. I work a lot in drama. So the first few days on set were all of these like drop-off scenes. They're light, they're comedic, you know. And I remember between takes, you know, we met, but we didn't really have much of a relationship. It was like, nice to meet you. We like bantered between takes a little bit. But a lot of that was him in the car. So like in between takes, he'd be like on his phone on Snapchat or playing poker or something like that. And I was just like, okay, this is what I expected. But as soon as we shifted, because we filmed those scenes at the beginning, like the days, like the first 10 days was like all like lighthearted school scenes. And as soon as we shifted to the more dramatic roles, it was like phone away. He's focused, fully engaged, like fully engaged. He humbled himself to the role. It's a true story. So you could tell that we all felt an extra responsibility to really honor these real people. But when I say he humbled himself, it's the sense that like he knew that I worked heavily in drama. So he'd literally like after a scene be like, what did you think of that? Wow. What could I do differently? And to me, like this, you know, this one of the top stars in the world asking me my opinion on his performance and how that felt for me was so amazing just to see somebody that caliber to be so humble. And you know, he's a very profound person. He turned 40 while we were on set and he just kept saying, I'm just getting started. I'm just getting started. And that was like his motto for the film. And to me, I just kept thinking, you've accomplished so effing much in your career already and you're just getting started.
Yeah.
That was his mentality. And like while we were shooting, he had a comedy special called Zero F's Given. And he was doing shows after 18-hour shoot days to rehearse his new material, to just try out different things. He was producing different things. He was doing his radio show all while shooting this movie. And like, we'd have these amazing heart-to-hearts because he was just so motivational, inspiring, and we have that similar mindset. So I remember at one point we were sitting together and it was one of my last days. And often on these Hollywood sets, even if you have a relationship with the star, you know, me and the girl who plays Maddie, we'd have our chairs together and we bonded so much on this project. And then they'd have Kevin and his team like 10 feet away in a chair. And he just looked and he was just like, why are you all the way over there? And sent his team, and he's like, go get her. And sent his team to like collect my chair, bring me next to him. So we chat and we like, you know, shot the shit. And at one point we were just like eating our salads and he just was like, man, this movie's going to change my career.
Yeah.
And I told him, like, yeah, I'm like, like you're gonna blow people away. It really is gonna change your career. And he's like, no, you don't understand. He goes, it's gonna change your career too.
I was just getting ready to say that.
And I almost cried because it was just so humble and so profound. And he was just like, I don't see the impact that you have, because like I mentioned to you before, there were a lot of my scenes that were shortened or cut, but a lot of the moments between all of us are moments that happen between the scenes. So there's a point in the trailer where Kevin is doing the floss dance to Melody.
Yeah.
That's directly from me. Me and Melody would dance between takes, and she was teaching me this dance. And Paul would look at me and be like, hey, can you teach that dance to Kevin? And that's why that's in that scene. And there's so many little silly moments between all of us that were put in the movie. So all of us, we have a presence felt throughout the movie. And it was so amazing that he could see that.
Yeah.
Even like, just to show you how he is, like at the end of the project, and I would never imagine a guy to do this, at the end of the project, he gave all of the key cast and key crew this like beautiful piece of memorabilia, this beautiful leather bound coffee table book of images from our set, like very intimate moments. And it was so moving, and it's something that I'll cherish forever. But that just shows how he is, and that's what he does for his projects. He cares. I could tell that he was a great father. There were days when we'd have 40 children on set, which is the most kids I've ever worked with.
Oh my
We'd
goodness.
have 40 kids working as background performers, and kids surprise you. They don't know what action and cut means. So they'd talk to us in between takes or during the scene, and he'd riff with them, he'd joke with them, he'd play with them. His kids came to visit, and his kids bought popsicles for like 150 people who were camped out at the park watching us film.
Wow.
So there are things about him that I think that he's released a few documentaries since we started shooting it that now you get to see, but I think that a lot of people didn't know that real human side to him. And yes, Kevin Hart that you see in the movies, that's who he is. He's very silly. He's natural and he's a jokester, but he's also very, very profound and very inspirational. Like you said, his podcast is outstanding. He's an incredible human being, and so is everybody that he's surrounded with.
That whole cast was amazing. The little girl, she pulled, Melanie pulled off that role, and I was like, oh my gosh, she sold it. I mean, like you said, the whole cast was amazing. You did amazing, and like Kevin says, he plans like 10 years ahead. He knows every move. So that had to rub off on you a little bit, right? Like that had to motivate you, because that had to. So what's next for you now? I mean, there has to be some big things coming. So is there anything you could talk about?
What can I talk about? So, because there's things that I can't talk about. So, I'm working on a few French TV shows, which is really cool. I get to act in French.
Nice.
Which is really fun. I haven't really, I've done a lot of French voiceover, but I haven't really acted on camera in French since I was a child. So that's a really, really cool sphere to enter. I have a new show called Dungeons and Distancing.
Yeah, I saw that. That looks cool.
A Dungeons and Dragons themed show about this, very unlikely group of friends who adapt their gameplay to Zoom over the pandemic. And so you get to see live gameplay, but you also get to see like the antics and the adventures and the relationships between these characters. And I play the Dungeon Master.
Oh.
So, which means that as a voice actor, it was amazing. And as somebody who loves animation, it was so much fun, because the Dungeon Master, the DM, they're responsible for kind of driving the story and introducing the characters that their adventurers meet. So, I got to, on this show, play with little tiny weasels and like big ogres and Amazonian princesses and like eccentric billionaires and things like that. So it was just an opportunity to, first of all, learn, because I have never played Dungeons and Dragons. So really relying on, the cast and the team, but also just jump head on into silliness, which is like my happy place, is just being silly. So it was so much fun. So we just released the final episode. So it is available for view, but it's also doing rounds of festivals. I'm also writing, so I'm working on 2 series that I'm developing right now. So there's a lot in the works, and there's things that I can't talk about yet, but hopefully I'll be able to talk about soon.
Well, I will have to definitely do a follow-up one day here, and when everything's out. And now it's time to have some fun. I was talking about this earlier. It's time for the audition challenge. Are you ready?
Oh God, I don't know if I'm ready. Let's see.
I put a script in your chat, and so this is a commercial. And once you read this, you can look it over. You'll realize it'll bring you back to 1980 something. I'm into the whole nostalgic commercials and stuff. Okay. And go ahead and take away when you're ready.
You want 3 takes, like if it's a voice gig?
Yeah, perfect. Look at it. This is professional right here. All right.
They're back and more tasty than ever. The new tidal wave gum with caramel loca doca choca is here and ready to take your taste buds for a ride. They're back and more tasty than ever. The new tidal wave gum with caramel loca doca choca is here and ready to take your taste buds for a ride. They're back and more tasty than ever. The new tidal wave gum with caramel loca doca choca is here and ready to take your taste buds for a ride.
That was awesome. Isn't that fun?
It's so much fun. No pressure whatsoever, right?
No, Teneisha, you're awesome. And before I let you go, it's my cliche question. I know I always ask it, but I have a lot of listeners who want to be an actress, an actor, or a voice actor, or whatever. What inspiring words would you give them getting into being an actor?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I have so many things to say. Okay, it's never too late. There's no age limit to be on screen or to have your voice. There's a place for every voice and every face and every body. Just because it might not look like the way you envision it, but you'll be able to do something because there's a place for you. So whether that means community theater, your dad's company doing his voicemail system, there is something there for you. And I would say stop thinking and start doing. That's the biggest thing, because in any field, analysis paralysis is a real thing, and it's so easy to get caught up in the research. Just take a class. Whether it's on Zoom or in person. Don't be afraid to fail. Failure is part of the game. Some of the most magical moments I've had on set are because I failed, because I messed up a line, or I was supposed to cry and I laughed instead. Just have fun. And hey, reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer anybody on Instagram.
You are awesome. You're awesome. Teneisha Collins, thank you so much for being on Behind the Audition podcast. You rock.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
For more information about Teneisha Collins, be sure to check her out on her website at TeneishaCollins.com.
Thanks for listening in on Behind the Audition podcast, made possible by Hilton Productions. If you need a male or female voiceover, contact us at HiltonProductions.com. Hilton Productions, let our voices do the selling.